My name is Melon. It's short for Mary Ellen. And I have been teaching adults who are afraid in water for 40 years and 5 weeks. And what I've found in this time is that there are two main pedagogies of teaching swimming. One is learning strokes is learning to swim, and learning strokes is learning to be safe in deep water. And the other is learning to be comfortable in deep water is learning to swim. And once you're comfortable in deep water and you feel safe, then you can learn strokes, which make you efficient. But learning strokes, learning to be efficient, does not make you safe in deep water. And that's my stand. For the first 20 years or so of my career, I used to dream of being asked to go on to Oprah. And she would always, in my visualization, ask me for the research that backed up what I was saying. And I knew I had no documented research, but I saw every day, every week, every year, for all these years, what I'm going to tell you today. And I realized I would have said to her, I don't have documented research, but I have a ton of evidence. And this, as I spoke with Angela last night, came to the point of, okay, someone else has got to do this research. I'm not going to do it. I've already done it. Now someone else's role is to put it on paper. Make comfortable in deep water and learning to swim easy for every person. This is a very simple thing to do, but not in a system that we've been using for the last 100 and some years. Okay, if we take adults who are afraid in water, and in the United States, half of the adults are afraid in water, approximately. That was from a 1998 poll. I believe that more current research has shown that more than half are afraid in water. If they're afraid in water, they can't swim. They're dangerous in deep water. Okay, you never know if they're going to panic, and panic is the thing that's most dangerous for people who are in the water. So how do we get people to learn to swim in an easy way? We give them what they want. In the US, 80% of the drownings are by adults. Now, everything that I've heard in these 2 days has been about kids. And every study that you hear is about 1 to 4, 1 to 5, all of this. But 80% of the drownings in the US are by adults. What are we thinking? If we are into drowning prevention, we need to put our resources into the adults. At least 80% of the resources. Why aren't we? Well, because we don't know what to do with adults. We might have to face our own fear if we start talking about adults. We might have to say we don't know how to swim ourselves if we start doing research on adults. So it gets scuttled. And I want to ask why. What is going on here? If we want to reduce the drownings in the US by 80%, we need to teach adults to swim. We need to teach them to be comfortable and safe in deep water. And that means, as I said, giving them what they want. I'm getting to that. Accidents versus responsibility. When I was taking my last online remedial driving course because I got a ticket for something, I found that there are accidents. We call it, I had a car accident, and then there are crashes. And in the world of traffic safety, they call accidents crashes because an accident could have been prevented. And if you know what you're doing and you're careful, you will not have an accident. Very few accidents are really accidents in driving. And the rest is they could have been prevented. Now, we all know in our space, drowning prevention space, that drowning is mostly preventable, almost all preventable. Are drowning accidents? No, mostly not. They are a lack of information. On the occasion of these 80% of adults who drown, 80% of the drownings that are adults, mostly are preventable. and as well as kids who have been in swimming lessons, but they don't know enough yet to be able to take care of themselves in water. So because the responsibility of someone's safety is on themselves, not on the parent, when you get right down to it, not on the lifeguard, it's about, can I take care of myself in deep water? I don't call drowning victims victims. They're not victims. I call them drownees. Okay? They drowned because there was something they didn't know. Now, is there fault? No. We're not talking about fault. We're talking about, I have to be responsible for my safety. And each adult has to be. And that means I have to take care of my own learning. If you're telling me what to do in the pool, I have to have a voice in whether I'm ready to do it or not. Because if I'm not, I am not going to learn. And the pedagogy that says learning strokes is learning to swim says you learn these techniques with your arms and do this with your feet and push and glide off the wall. And if you do that, you'll become safe in deep water. If you don't ask me if I'm ready for that, if you don't say to me, how do you feel about putting your face in, let alone push and glide off the wall, then you're not involving me in the process, and I'm not involving myself. But I need to say, if I'm afraid, don't tell me to do push and glide. I am afraid to put my face in. I know I'll suck up water in my nose if I put my face in. Or if I let go of the wall, I'm going to panic because my feet aren't on the bottom. Each person's got to be responsible for saying, this is my part. You do your part, I'll do my part. We'll get to the end, which is I want to be safe and comfortable in deep water. Jeanette was one of our students who told us that when she took swimming lessons as a kid, she was so afraid to let go of the wall that she didn't. And her teacher came along and stood on her fingers with his shoes on, her teacher on the deck, to make her let go. Vernon was taking swimming lessons. He was told by his instructor that he didn't float. He couldn't float. And he was not happy to hear this. And I've heard this from many students. And on his first day of lessons with us in December, he felt himself being held up by the water in the shallow end. And he said, is that floating? And I said, yeah. And he said, if I float here, will I float there in the deep end? And I said, yeah. And he suddenly became curious. And that afternoon, he floated in the deep end for the first time in his life after many swimming lessons. Lisa took swimming lessons many times. She told us about one where she took lessons for 3 months, 3 times a week, for an hour each time. And at the end of the 3 months, she had made no progress. And she said, my swimming instructor had no idea what to do with me. And this is very common. Now, I've seen 6,000 students between me and my licensees. And I only know the people who I've seen. I don't know how many people or what percentage of adults who go to swimming lessons that are traditional swimming lessons come out of those traditional swimming lessons safe in deep water. I do know that the people who come to us after having read our website and said this makes sense to me, they tell us that their swimming instructors didn't know what to do with their fear. Sometimes they'll say, I had a teenager teach me and I didn't really feel like we connected. Or they'll say, my teacher just stared at me and kept telling me to do the same thing over and over again, and I froze. If you've worked with adults, you've probably seen this. What we have to do as teachers is connect with our students. We need to have a heart. We need to spill out our love. We need to put our egos on the shelf when we walk into the class. And we need to say, what happened? What made you afraid? Oh, we can fix that. Not that it's a therapy session, but there are beliefs that adults who are afraid in water have that are unbelievable. They're believable. I shouldn't say that. But they show that there's something that went wrong. And there's a way to correct it. And swimming lessons in the most widely used pedagogy, traditional swimming lessons, are not addressing it. Okay? Now, I know there are people in this room who are afraid in water. You've told us. And I hope that this is good news to you today. when you see, what I did with the data that I collected over all those years was I looked at what I saw. I said to myself, this isn't what the Red Cross taught me when I took WSI, but I'm seeing it, and I'm teaching beginning swimming, and half the people in this class, there are 20 people in this class, half of them can't do what I'm asking them to do. They need something that comes before beginning swimming. There is no such thing there is no such thing. Nothing comes before beginning swimming. I've got to make up something new. And so that's what I did. And what I did was I looked at what I saw, I tested it, I had an idea, I tested it, I found it to work every single time, and I ran with it. And I've been running with it for 40 years, and it never fails. And I do mean 100% of the time. It doesn't fail, and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so I covered this basically already. Last month, I polled 800 afraids. I call afraid adults afraids. And I said to them, send me your 2 burning questions about learning to swim. And I also polled 80 instructors. And I said, send me your burning questions about teaching adults who are afraid in water to swim. The afraids said, how do I overcome my fear? How do I find a swimming class where they know what to do about this? The instructors said, how do I get people to overcome their fear? How do I teach them to float? And the afraids also said, how do I learn to float? How do I get so I'm not afraid to let go of the wall? So the afraids and the instructors had the same questions. The instructors are not qualified to teach afraids. If they have the same questions, they don't belong teaching afraids. So what do people want? They want to feel safe. They want to not feel silly or look silly. They want to be in control of themselves. They don't want to panic. They want to be heard. They want to be understood. They want to be met at eye level. They want to go slowly. They don't want time pressure. They don't want to push themselves, and they don't want to be pushed. They are just as afraid of swimming in the water. I mean, they're as afraid of their teacher as they are of the water in many cases. And so an afraid wants to know that a teacher can see them and can say, yeah, I have that covered. And when we start a class and we spend the first hour on land, all of our classes are 1 hour on land, 2 hours in the water. On the first day, people are shaking in their boots. You know, did I do the right thing? After the first hour, they're ready to go because we've let them know that we're trustworthy. How do we provide this? One part is staying on land and talking first, asking them what made them afraid. And they all tell their stories, and they find out that they're not the only person in the room who's afraid or who had this happen to them. They find out that when they took swimming lessons before, the definition of learning to swim was strokes, and that we say that the definition of learning to swim is becoming safe in deep water and comfortable in deep water. And they all breathe a sigh of relief. That's what they think learning to swim is, too. In fact, it was when my students got to the second level of our classes and they got to where they could hang out in deep water for an indefinite amount of time that they said, I can swim. And I thought, what? I thought learning to swim was strokes. But I realized, no, they're right. I'm wrong. And in our second level, they do learn that. They all can hang out as long as they want in deep water. How else do we provide it? By going slowly. And by using this diagram. This is a diagram of presence of mind. Okay, this is what panic looks like. When people are calm, they're in the leftmost circle. We call it the first circle. And in the rightmost circle, they've lost it. That's panic. Okay? Panic is that's an injury. When someone's panicked, they are hurt. And people are allowed to panic as a part of learning to swim in traditional swimming lessons. instructors don't know that this is to be avoided at all costs. So what we do is we say the goal of everything we do, since you have come to this class to learn how to be in control in the water and deep water all the time, the goal is to practice being in control all the time. That's what we need to be expert at. We don't have to be expert at being scared or pushing it. We need to be expert at being in control. So everything we do is going to be about being in this first circle. And they go, I can do that. And then they'll say, well, if I don't push myself, am I going to learn? And I say, well, how did you learn to walk? You didn't push yourself then. You didn't compare yourself to the neighbor baby. You didn't say, I did more yesterday than I did today. You just let yourself be yourself, and you ask all your questions, and you let yourself play. This never, ever fails. So we make the first circle the goal. And when everyone agrees on that on the first day, we are in a whole new place. People are saying, there's hope for me. It's not about strokes. We also say there's no timetable. In fact, when I first started this, 40 years and 5 weeks ago, and I said, how am I going to make this safe for myself? I could have somebody 3 times my size in class, and I got to know all the time that I'm going to be safe. Well, first I got to let go of how long it takes for them to learn to swim. Second, and I need to let them know, I don't know how long it's going to take. And I need to say, we're going to go so slowly and do things that are so safe for you that not only are you safe, but I'm safe. And we're not doing anything where I feel like I'm taking a risk. And I might say, I can't stay in my body for that if you try it. We're not doing that. And they laugh. I also don't try to convince them of anything. I don't encourage. I don't cheerlead. I call it cheerleading. I don't want to have any influence on what's going on over there. I want them to be in their body, having all of what they do come from their internal information. Like, I want to try this. Not tempted by my encouragement, but how do I feel about this? Oh, I want to try this. If I don't try it, I'm going to be disappointed. So we don't try to convince them of anything. We don't try to convince them that the deep water holds them up. We say, you want to try it? I'll be there. I'll put my arm under your armpit, or I'll put you on a tether. You cannot sink, only if it sounds like fun. And that's one of our mottos. We only do things if they sound like fun. And we made sure that people felt like they could be themselves. They didn't have to pretend that they were learning with us. I've heard some of my students say that in their classes they have felt badly for the teacher, so they pretended that they were enjoying themselves or learning something when they weren't. We want people to be completely themselves, because that's what being in the first circle is. So what we're talking about here is, over the years I've thought, well, what are my students hearing before they come? And it's learning strokes is learning to swim. Learning strokes makes people safe in deep water. Learning strokes makes you comfortable in deep water. If something's comfortable, if it's uncomfortable, just keep practicing the discomfort and it'll become comfortable. Well, these things are not true for people who are afraid in water. So if half of the adults in the United States are afraid in water and they want to learn to swim, we need to not use the traditional pedagogy for them. We need to use another one. We need to use one that gives them a chance, because they don't have a chance. And Connie, when you mentioned the 252 people who signed up for swimming lessons, I go, oh no, because I know that most of them are afraid. And, if you go through and you give them our beliefs list of all the things that people check off and they go, oh my God, I checked off everything on that list, they'll say, how am I going to overcome these things when I'm trying to learn to do this in class? That isn't going to get me there. They know this, but do the instructors know? Usually not. Okay. So the way to be successful, to make every single person, now if they have a learning disability, I don't know. I haven't worked with people with learning disabilities. But the people that I've worked with over the years, the 6,000, this is what has worked. And it never fails. Understanding how the water works, that's what people want to know. It's not how do I float, it's do I float. Teach them that they float, not how to float. Get their stories. Keep them in the first circle all the time. Give them games to learn. Acknowledge their breakthroughs. Ask them how they feel all the time. Always check in. Each student, if I have 8 students in class, I check in with all of them at the end and see how they did, what they thought about their class. Take the timetable away and leave your ego at the door. I learned that the hard way a couple times. I'm going to show them how much I know. Let's see if you can jump in today. Wrong. Blew that one up. But also, there's a trust that builds that just can't be replaced. And when they have this trust, because you've taken time to listen, you've got them. And you have to keep proving yourself. You have to keep making sure they know that you're trustworthy. You have to be honest. If you're not honest, the trust will be blown, and they'll pick it up just like that. Also, if your ego comes into it, they're going to pick it up just like that, and your trust gets blown. So when you make a mistake, you got to tell them. I've done this so many times. I'm totally convinced that I have to be honest, and that's what works. This is what learning looks like. It's the opposite of losing it. Going from calm to panic is the circles going up. Learning looks like this. Does that look like learning to you? What do you think? Does it look like learning? Yeah. And did the other one look like panic? The opposite way? This is what's possible. When you start at the beginning, this man, do I have time to show a 3-minute video? Yeah? Okay. Yeah. This man came in December, came from South America. People have come from 50 states and 17 countries. Why did they come to us for a week and drop all that money to do this? Because they can't find what they want at home. They wouldn't do it otherwise. He came, he was afraid to put his face in the water. He knew he would get water in his nose, and he would, until we talked about the 5 circles. So this is on the second day. This is on the first afternoon, after he had asked me if he would float in deep water. He's attached to the wall with a tether here. That just speeds up learning, but it's not part of the system. Did this on his own. I didn't say anything about doing that. He disconnected the tether on his own. This is in shallow. We say learning to swim is learning to do stuff. Get things off the bottom, how to get down there. That was into 8 feet, his first jump. Now he's ready to go into the deep. This isn't his first time in the deep. But you can see that he's in the first circle. He's not moving fast. He's not panicking. He's completely present. And learning to swim is about being still. If you can't be still in deep water, completely still inside, you can't swim. Then he wanted to take jump off the boat class, which is part of a series of 5 to bring people to pool and open water competency. And even though the water was ridiculously cold, there was no stopping him. And then he was obviously on the wrong setting, but it was neat to see him away from the boat and just able to hang out. And then the next week, he left for being on holiday with his friends. And the next week, he sent us a picture of himself surfing. Yeah, you would have been interested. What you said to me the other day, was it you? No, Killian. Yeah, what you said to me the other day was the same thing he said about how you got him to people to stand up. So that is how I would like for all swimming teachers to approach their adults afraid in water. And I would like to have research done on the difference between traditional swimming lessons and the results of those and the lessons that we give that are so student-centered. Thank you so much for listening.
Questions? Excuse me, coming in front of me.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you very much. Brilliant. Really informative again. So I have a question for you. I was going to ask about the ocean and the sea, and that the last bit of the video answered that for me. But one of the biggest barriers that I hear from friends and other people in terms of the ocean and the sea, and obviously I'm Coast Guard, so that's kind of my main interest, is wildlife. So I have friends who not necessarily afraid of the water, but are afraid of crabs, jellyfish, sharks, and we're in Ireland, we don't have that much wildlife. How do you get people like him? Did he have a barrier to going in the ocean after he was comfortable in the water due to wildlife, or have you explored that psychologically?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. One of the courses in our series is called Ocean 101, and that's where we deal with how do I get in the water when there are breakers, sea life, sharks, and the only thing that I know of that makes a person safe is listening to their intuition about, is today a good day for me to get in the water? Because in a regular summer, on a beach day, when 1,000 people are at the beach in Florida, and one person gets bitten by a shark, only one person was really in danger. But did that person, so often you'll hear not often, but sometimes you'll hear in the story that the person thought he shouldn't go in that day, or had some little inkling. And the only way, if you check in, if you're quiet before you go in, and we teach our people to do this, let's take a little bit of time to just be quiet and go inside and check with yourself. Just see, does it feel like a safe day for you to get in the water? For me, I'll just say, for me, if I get a yes or nothing, I'm good to go. If I have some little, I go, oh no, I'm the teacher and I'm getting the signal not to go. I can't go. And for them, they'll get the signal too. And what other thing can you do? That's really it. But they're all satisfied with that. Every single one of them. It's a good question.
Thanks for the presentation. Just from the perspective of your comment about evidence base, the steps you describe map quite closely to stress inoculation training and psychological skills training. Stress inoculation training is as an example, for treatment of PTSD, anxiety, and panic. They include classroom-based component, which you describe in your experiences. They involve practical coping skills, including imagery, relaxation. And then also the final stage is serial exposure to the situation that causes them anxiety. So I think there's some really nice synergies with that work. So stress inoculation training was brought forward by Donald Meichenbaum in the 1970s. and psychological skills training is traditionally used in relation to athletic performance, which was in the late 80s. So I think looking maybe some synergies with that would also help inform the approach that you're taking, which seems to support those steps. But really interesting presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I've heard that some research has been done that supports the things that I've been saying.
I'm getting there as quick as I can.
Melon, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm just curious, Richard and I were at the Queensland Water Safety Strategy a couple of months ago, and a lot of the swim schools are talking about the lack of resources. The education department is pulling the money out of swim lessons and all those sorts of things. Just as a resource question, what's your sort of teacher to student ratio, and what's your time frame to getting, given you don't want to push people, because it will ultimately come down to a government or an education body or someone like that saying, okay, I'm going to give you $1 million to get X number of students through. And is it comparable to the classic 8-week you can float on your back and turn and kind of lessons?
Mm-hmm. Yes. This man that was in the video, that was 33 days for him. And typically it's 2 or 3 weeks from terror to I can be free in deep water all day. I can just hang out here all day. Usually it's 2, but sometimes it's 3. And to demonstrate this, after this man did this was the first time in December that someone came and did all our core courses in one go. We said, okay, for the 40th, because this is our 40th anniversary this year, we're going to have an adult summer camp. We're going to offer all these courses, not bang, 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 but with weeks of rest in between, rest and practice time, because the rest is just as important as the pool time. And we're going to just open this up so people who have been dreaming of taking swimming lessons or coming to Miracle Swimming for years can come and do it all in one go. And we have 3 people who have signed up for it. One of them is not going to be able to come, but 2. And we're really excited to see them do the same thing that this guy did in 33 days. But we found that learning to swim and becoming comfortable in deep water is a very fast process when you do the right thing, when you teach the right thing. Now, as far as resources go also, when people say to me, we don't have the money for that, I say, well, if the building burned down, would you have money to fix it? Or if your tires were all 4-slashed, would you have money to get new tires? It's a matter of priority. And water safety has got to be up there on the top.
Well, I completely agree with you, but I don't think most government funding organisations take that approach.
Sure, but we just don't have, because we know we're right, we just have not found the words. You know, when people say, we can't afford to heat up the pool like you do to 92 degrees, I say, new approach needed. Go to your electrical company who is making money hand over fist and say, would you donate the last 7 degrees of our pool heat from 84 to 91 or 92? And could we have this arrangement for at least one pool in our community so that we can get a warm enough pool for people? Because we're in the water for 2 hours. You can't do that on 84 degrees. You know, is it time for me to go?
One last question, and then we're going to have a 5-minute comfort break. I find usually after coffee, after 1 hour, we need a 5-minute comfort break before we wrap up the morning. But one from Linda first.
Thank you. You and I talked yesterday about would you be willing to consider this a disability? And I raised that term because disability is one way to get funding and to get focus. And I think you really pointed out, and we know that that fear is a strong underlying issue that affects other communities who are high risk, and so we all know that. So I'm a perfect example of the fear of swimming, having been raised in an Asian family and Chinese, and turns out the Vietnamese who we studied in Seattle are pretty much terrified of the water. And so my mother compensated, as Connie said, by sending me to private lessons for swimming. And I don't think my sisters went, so I'm the only one who swims in my family. And my sisters won't go near the water. And I then married into a waterphilic family, and so spent the rest of my life next to rivers and in kayaks and snorkeling. So it's still something that bothers me. So I really am interested in this because, I will swim half a mile in the pool for exercise during residency. We had aqua rounds. And then I think I've overcome a lot of it by snorkeling in totally benign waters in the Sea of Cortez. But what I won't do is I won't swim in the open water in the lake I live on.
Open water what?
The open water, the lake I live on. Mm. So I'm still disabled because the rest of my family will go out willy-nilly.
Yeah.
So I think I'd like to see this identified as a specific group of people who need special help, just as if I were putting my child in swim lessons who's autistic, and there's a big movement in the United States about water safety for autistic children because of their higher drowning rates, and other people with disabilities. And so we've actually addressed that in the U.S. Water Safety National Action Plan. And I would like to see this included as a disability.
I wouldn't mind. I don't know if the students would mind. They also, Connie was talking about barriers, shame. Call myself disabled. Don't tell anybody else. So, but if it brings money, funding for what we need, it's okay with me. We'd have to explain it to the students,
Thank you, Melon. Thank you very much indeed. We'll have a...
Thank you.